Welcome, everyone, to the One More Game podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jeremy Culver, a.k.a. Darce, and with me is Matt Sharp. Matt, how are you doing, man?
Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
I was going to introduce myself as Pete to throw people off, but you kind of ruined that.
Hey, if you want to be the California thirst quencher, we'll pull you in on that one. That's completely fine. But Matt, thank you so much for joining us. So for everyone that is tuning into this episode, of course, this one is a special episode because unfortunately Pete is sick, so he cannot be here with us. But on top of that, we are doing our first ever full interview with a game developer here for the One More Game podcast, something I've been wanting to do for quite a while. As some of you that are following me on my YouTube channel know, I said in that video about a year ago now that I'm going to be doing interviews, but it just hasn't came to fruition. But Matt, you came in and saved the day, which is great, and I'm glad to have you here because you just released a game about a month ago now, and I got to check it out. You reached out to me, and it works out perfectly for this to fit into place. So for people to get an idea about yourself, obviously you're wearing the shirt of the game that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. Yes, right there, Fables. But let me ask you a little bit to just talk a little bit about yourself. Let people get to know who you are and kind of what your studio is about.
Yeah, my name's Matt. I live in Delaware. I come from Farmville, Delaware, basically, so you wouldn't expect a game developer to pop up there. I've been gaming all my life since I was 3 years old. I started doing minor game development when I was like 12-ish or something like that, starting with RPG Maker. So I've been doing game development for a long time. I released my first game when I was about 17. It's called Lucid Awakening. I released a sequel called Lucid Awakening 2, and that was my first Steam game, so you could check that out as well. And then I messed around with like some mobile development. I actually taught game development at a university for about 4 years. And then I finally released Video Game Fables July 15th. And that's kind of like my big game, I would say. You know, Lucid Awakening is kind of like my dabbling into commercial development. Mm-hmm. But I would say it's like my first big game where I'm really like pushing marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think you obviously have done a great job with it. I got to check it out as I did talk about it, and we'll, of course, talk about that a little bit later here in the show. But you know, of course, I definitely did notice, you know, the differences that Lucid Awakening 2 brought out. Because, of course, as you did say, Lucid Awakening was released on RPG Maker 2000. And from what you wrote in your press kit, and I think it was also on the Steam page, that one never really left the RPG Maker community. So, of course, I didn't get to check that one out. But with you saying Lucid Awakening 2 was on Steam, I went and dabbled on the page, checked it out, saw what the reviews were saying and stuff. And so there's quite at least the feeling from the reviews and stuff and the trailer that you put out, a contrast of let's just say personality from Lucid Awakenings 2 to Fables. So we'll of course get more into that here in a little bit. But before we get into that discussions, I got to get through the intro. As always, for the people that are listening to this podcast, welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy your listen, and I hope you enjoy your stay. We are, sorry, I'm messing this up because I'm not used to this part, but welcome everybody to the One More Game podcast. This is a podcast centered around making sure you're informed about all the video game news happening around the world, whether it's Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, or PC. If there's news that you need to know about, we'll make sure that you know about it. When you're listening to this on your podcast service, make sure you hit the subscribe button or the follow button, depending on what your service offers. And if your podcast service allows reviews, please leave a 5-star review and tell everyone why you love the One More Game podcast, because we really enjoy bringing this to you each and every Friday. If you'd like to be part of the show by asking a question or suggesting a topic for discussion, head on over to pressstartnews.net/onemoregame and fill out the submission form, and your submission could be used on the next episode. And normally when we are streaming, if you wanted to stop by and drop your comments in the chat, we reference them throughout the show. However, we are recording this a week early because I am leaving for vacation with my wife's birthday. So, Matt, again, thank you so much for being able to accommodate and come in here for the podcast. But for everyone, if this is your first time to the podcast, welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy your listen, and I hope you enjoy your stay. If you are returning, you already know what it is. We start off every single podcast talking about what we've been playing lately. So, Matt, what have you been playing lately?
I have been playing the crippling game developer post-release anxiety game for a while. That's to be honest, like I've been working pretty much full time on this for about 2 years. I worked on like on and off like 3 years before that, so I haven't had much time. But if there's like a big release coming out, I do take some time off. Like the last one I took time off for was Elden Ring. I took like
Ooh, okay.
I didn't take a week off, but like I actually let myself have some time to breathe and do something. But after release, I've been letting myself relax a little bit for the first time in years, and it's kind of nice. What I've been playing is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'm a big weeb, obviously, because that's the big weeb game right now.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Have you been playing it?
I have. So funny enough, and I'm a huge Xenoblade fan. I have the copy right here in front of me, but I have not played it because I actually put out a tweet about this the other night. While I could play any of these newer games that I have, I went back to playing Resonance of Fate, the 4K HD remaster. So like I haven't touched it yet. I'm going to because I love it, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts because obviously it's getting a lot of good praise, a lot of high reviews and stuff. So you, especially as a game developer, I think is an interesting component. So what do you think so far of your time diving into the game?
I think it's amazing. I think it's been a very long time since I got to play like a very story-based, like character-driven RPG game. I can't even think of the last one I played. It's been so long. I mean, like here and there, I've played more like casual games. Like I'll play stuff like Stardew Valley, or I play like Tetris 99 a lot. You know, just more like kind of games I can just turn my brain off and play. But it's been so long since I've played a game like this. Like I really can't even remember the last time I played a big RPG like this. And it's very refreshing because obviously I'm an RPG fan. That's pretty much all the games I've made so far. So that's, you know, pretty much a given. You know, I've grown up playing all of the greats. You know, I played all the Final Fantasies, Chrono, like, you know, all the great RPGs. So it's just been so long since I've been able to do this, and it just really brings me back to what made me like fall in love with RPGs and gaming. Just being able to play a game where I'm connected to the world, the story, the characters, and just really get invested in it and get like emotionally invested in these characters. It's very nice to be able to do that again because it's been so long for me, and I think it's a very nice way to get back into that. I do have issues with like some of the gameplay, and I've only played. I'll be honest, I haven't finished Xenoblade Chronicles 1. I started that a long time ago, like when it came out. For whatever reason, I never finished it. I didn't really enjoy it. It's just one of those games, just kind of like got sidetracked or whatever. So I have played Xenoblade Chronicles 2 all the way through. I didn't play Xenoblade Chronicles X at all. So I do have issues with the gameplay, and I don't know how much you want to go into that if you want to talk about that. But
We can talk about it real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I'll start by saying that I think this is a wonderful game. Like this is like a 9 out of 10 game, 10 out of 10 game for me. But every game, you know, has its issues.
Oh, yeah.
I think I like maybe like the older I get or something. Maybe I'm just a boomer, but I feel like I really connect with turn-based RPGs in terms of gameplay more. I played the demo for Tales of Arise, and it kind of had the same underlying issues that I do have with some of the gameplay in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and that I did have with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 as well. I just feel like there's not enough control over the game. It just feels kind of like it's more about the preparation before a battle, in my opinion, which is fine because I'm a min-maxer. Like I love like I'm the guy where I will have spreadsheets for a game. I will literally make spreadsheets for games, especially RPGs. Like I love that kind of stuff. I love
Sounds
min-maxing.
like a game developer if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. I mean, like for example, like I played Final Fantasy 14 online. I was a hardcore raider for a while, so like I was very min-maxy and stuff. So for me, it's like I love like party strategy. I love like theory crafting and stuff like that. And this game does have that. But I just feel like there's not enough control over the battle. Like you're really controlling one character. I was just talking about on Twitter the other day with someone. I feel like what the game needs is an easier way to switch party members. Because right now you hold ZL and hit R or L, and you basically just cycle through the party in order. I think what they need is to add a way to pause the game and pick another party member. Like maybe like you hold a button and just the game pauses, and then you can pick which party member you want from like a circle menu or something like that. Because right now it's so clumsy to switch around characters, and it's hard for me to remember like say for example I'm controlling like I'm not sure how familiar you are with the characters, like I'm controlling Noah or something, and then I'm trying to get to like Lance or something like that. It's hard to go from Noah to Lance. You have to cycle I think like 4 times to get to him, and it's not very intuitive to switch party members. So then it's the issue of you're pretty much just relying on the AI, which isn't so great. You know, people are standing in the way of like AoEs, and healers aren't really healing who they should be. So it's that's like my only issue with the game. Really, it's just that I don't have enough control, and it's like, at least give me the option to switch party members easier, because it seems that's the best way to handle some of these situations, like with healers not healing correctly and stuff like that. So it's hard. And like I said, I connect more with turn-based games because you have so much control. And I like the systems in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, especially how they had like the did you play Xenoblade Chronicles 2?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I bought that day one. I still haven't finished it, unfortunately. I'm like 50 hours into it and just still haven't actually beat it. But
yeah, so at 50 hours, you might have all the battle mechanics. They keep laying them on until like the end of the game. And like, yeah, and there's so many cool systems in that game, like with the elemental. I spent a while to play, like the elemental orbs you make, and it's very similar to like the skill chain and magic burst system in Final Fantasy 11, which I love. And it's just like, there's all these really cool systems, but I wish I had more control over it. And I just think like a turn-based RPG or something like that, or easier way to like gives commands to party members. I don't know. I just feel like I don't have control, and it's kind of hard to really identify what the exact solution is. But yeah, I just gravitate more toward turn-based RPGs, I guess.
Yeah, honestly, with what you're saying there, and for those that have been around the podcast for a while, you're kind of echoing statements that I have made or said in previous episodes. I'm a huge turn-based RPG fan. Like, I love RPGs in general, but I've always loved turn-based RPGs, and it's for the reason that you talked about it. It really focuses your mind of being like, okay, how do I want to go about this battle? How do I tackle said boss, utilizing the strengths and weaknesses of each of my party members? Whereas with like Xenoblade, and again, I'm a big fan of Xenoblade, but it is what you said. You're relying on your other teammates, to the AI, to do what is necessary to help you win. And when you're trying to control that one character, it can feel like, oh no, this guy is standing in the middle of an AoE that's going to wipe us. Get him out. And it's like, why isn't the AI moving? And so like, I totally hear you on that. And I also want to just make a slight comment, because you talked about, the healers not healing properly. I see, of course, the Keyblade behind you. So it sounds like another Donald moment for you.
You can tell I have some PTSD from that.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
It's funny you bring that up, because even Kingdom Hearts had more control over your AI. You had like sliders and stuff you could do, and I feel like Xenoblade would even benefit from that. And I feel like it's not an issue with Kingdom Hearts so much, where everyone's just kind of doing their own thing, and it's mostly just Sora doing everything, if you be honest.
Oh yeah.
But I do feel like I don't know. This is a game that really relies on party interaction. Like, you have the break, topple, daze burst system, and like the launch and the smash. It's like you're just relying on your teammates to keep those skills ready to go and time them properly. It's like, man, that's with such a heavy. It's such a cool system. Like, all this reliance on like this inner teamwork, but it's like there's no way to really control that and manage it properly.
Yeah, and I also love the aspect that you did bring up, and I think it's a key component that I look towards is the using the wheel to select your teammates, doing like a pause to select it. So, for instance, with a game that's coming up very soon in October, that I'm really looking forward to as a fan of the series, is Star Ocean: The Divine Force, and that's something that where yes, all the characters do their own thing, but they do have technically a pause menu where you can bring up the menu and then you can quickly cycle through your like person that you want to do. It's not as easy as a wheel, which would be better, but it is a way to try to, oh, my guy is about to die, like, depending on which one you're playing, right? And then you quickly switch over to your healer to heal that character. It's like, okay, now I redirected that AI to actually heal me the way that it should. But if you don't have control, yeah, you're kind of just hoping, please just heal me in the proper way.
And I think something like Final Fantasy VII Remake would be good as well. How you can just directly issue a command to them and the game kind of pauses for that.
Yes, exactly. The wait system in that one. Of course, it's not quite a pause, but you're right. I mean, it slows it down to like almost like a crawl that would be very useful. And still, I think, which is what Xenoblade is trying to do, is have that feeling of there's always action going on. And there isn't basically a pause to be like, oh, what should I do here in the middle of battle? So using a great example, as you said, the Final Fantasy VII Remake wait system could still make it feel that, where it's like you still got you don't have a lot of time to decide, but you have more time to try to quickly switch through. So for myself, real quick, because of the timing's sake, as I did say, I've been playing a lot of Resonance of Fate 4K HD remaster. I've been playing a little bit of Fire Emblem Warriors as well, because I just really love the character interactions of Fire Emblem. And so in past episodes, I've talked about Fire Emblem Warriors. It's still a lot of fun. But the other night, I was sitting down, getting ready to go play Fire Emblem Warriors, and I just randomly got that itch to go, all right, I'm going to launch Resonance of Fate. And man, I just forget how much I enjoy that game. Like, every time I talk about it, it was on my 5 most underrated games episode. I talked about Resonance of Fate. I bought it for my co-host Pete for our 1-year anniversary, but I didn't buy it for myself. And then I finally just recently bought it for myself again. And I love the combat nature of it. Like, you have RPGs that have guns, but like Resonance of Fate is basically, the battle system is built entirely around guns and modifying your gun to have the best, stuff for your combat. And I actually like really love it. I know the combat is convoluted and a lot of people like always get turned off by it because it is very difficult, but I feel like, and maybe it's because I've played it before, once you have the system down, it just feels so fun, and it's always really cool watching your character jump in the air and like just do flips and shoot guns and stuff. And it's a ton of fun. But my only gripe with it currently, but it is like a small gripe, is how serious the game wants to be, but then also has these random like weird humorous moments. So for instance, I started chapter 2. And for those that know, Chapter 2 of Resonance of Fate will already like get the idea. But if you haven't, just go Google Resonance of Fate Chapter 2 beginning and you'll see. But basically, there's this whole like dialogue that's going up beforehand, right before the chapter ends, of like these people died in a battle. And then Chapter 2 starts, and it's basically the two male characters watching a lewd TV show on screen. And then the female character is in the bath, having a bath, and like of course you could tell like there's water going on in the shower and stuff, and she's like humming to herself, and the power goes out, and then one of the characters like hears the girl scream, and he goes, oh no, there's a monster in the house, and he runs to the bathroom, and as you can imagine with any anime, he gets slapped across the face. And it's like, we just went from a somber scene to this like straight comedic like moment. What is going on? But I still love it. It's still a hilarious scene. Go look it up because there's more to the scene after it. But it's a lot of fun. Have you ever played Resonance of Fate?
I haven't, but I always wanted to. It just, I think you're talking about like the guns, like jumping over them and stuff. That's the one thing I remember from seeing that game, is just like really bombastic, kind of over the top combat of them like doing all kinds of flips and like the gunplay. And like, I know they have like, it's not just like, I'm going to stand here and attack. They're like running around the battlefield and stuff. I always wanted to play it. Wanted to play it. I just never got around to it.
Yeah, totally understand. So yeah, for those I've made mention before, it goes on sale periodically, which was really weird though. The last year, it only went on sale one time, which was like very strange. But it goes on sale periodically. It's out for PlayStation as well as for PC. And if you have the PS5, you can play it in 4K or PS4 Pro. But, of course, the PC version, it has all the way up to 4K. The other version, it's just 1080p, 60 frames per second. But we've been talking about what we've been playing lately for quite a bit. So let's get to, of course, the game catalog, the big thing here that we're here to talk about. And that, of course, is you, Matt, and your game, Video Game Fables. So let's kind of start things off a little bit. You talked a little bit about your history, like basically where you started in game development, getting to the point of the releasing of Video Game Fables. So I just want to ask you first off, as a fan who has made mention several times on the podcast, I am not a game developer, so I don't know all the ins and outs of things that are going on. But for you, how do you feel your, I guess, game development journey went when it comes to starting with RPG Maker? You did a university. For like the average person who maybe is considering or has like thought about getting into game development, do you feel like it's as hard as some people make it out to be, or do you feel like as long as you do the systems, properly, anyone can pick it up?
I think that some people make certain parts of it to be harder than they should be, but some of the aspects that people say are very difficult are how they make it sound. So it's kind of like a mixed bag, honestly. I do think a lot of people who talk about it being just impossible or hard to get into are kind of like from the old mindset before we had such great tools available to us. I mean, Unity didn't become free to use until it was like 2000. I want to say like 2015, 2012. It was somewhere in like the 2010s, I believe.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact date. And before that, there was basically nothing. I mean, you had to learn to like code your own engine from scratch, or you had to put absurd amounts of money into purchasing like Unreal Engine or Unity at that point. I mean, I'm talking like thousands of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and otherwise you would have stuff like Game Maker, which wasn't super fleshed out at that point in time. Right now, from what I've seen, I don't use Game Maker, so I don't want to speak for it, but Game Maker looks really, really good from what I've seen for it and what I heard from people. But back then it wasn't like the best thing, but you pretty much had to use Game Maker, RPG Maker, and that was about it. Or you had to be like a computer science genius. Like those were your three options essentially. But now it's like there's so many cool tools available. Like you can use for free at no cost. You can use Unity and Unreal Engine, and then we have Godot coming up, and these are tools that AAA studios use. These are tools that the games that we play, they use to make them. You know what I mean? So we've got stuff like, you can go get Unreal Engine, which is, like I'm a big Kingdom Hearts fan. Obviously, Kingdom Hearts 3 was made in Unreal 4, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have Unreal Engine 5 coming out, which looks amazing, and they've added so many cool features and with like the nanite mesh technology and all that stuff. But I think starting really isn't that hard. There's a lot. It is hard to actually like follow through. But just getting into it isn't hard. We have so many cool tools, and like I wish I had the tools as a kid that we have now. Like I think I would be so much better off and so much further along if I had that stuff instead of, messing around with RPG Maker 2000 or XP or whatever, Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, we have so many resources in terms of learning now. This stuff has been around for so long that the amount of like online courses, even a lot of free courses you can find on YouTube and stuff, it's absurd. There's so much content out there, so much learning content. There's so many actual tools available. There's no better time than now to get into the game development. Like there's so many avenues. And then I think what a lot of people hear when someone like me says something like that is they get overwhelmed, which I understand that. I get very easily overwhelmed with decisions. Like I need like someone to make decisions for me, basically. So like really it's yeah, and really it's one of those things where like if you're overwhelmed, just literally pick one. Just literally, even if you're rolling a dice or picking a name out of a hat, just pick one of them and just go with it, because you're never gonna like regret that. Like even if, for example, like with all the drama with Unity, like even if Unity went completely under, you would still have learned so much from developing in Unity that you can bring over to Unreal or Godot or any other engine. There's so many basics that carry over between all engines and all programming languages.
So and I don't mean to interrupt real quick, but that's a great, insightful question. So I'm kind of going to jump forward just a little bit, and then of course we'll kind of work backwards at times. But let's talk a little bit about Fables, because of course you just released it last month on July 15th, and I obviously you reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in looking at it? And as an RPG fan, I instantly, by just the description that you had, it caught my attention. But then the block style, and I don't have them here in my room, but like the little bead-like type characters caught my attention. I watched the trailer, chuckled at it, and was like, yeah, I'll check it out. Like, I definitely will check it out. And so I guess like I want to ask you, from your experience of doing RPG Maker 2000 to then releasing, of course, Lucid Awakening 2 in 2015. What made you decide, I guess, to go this approach with your first, as you called it, your first true game, your first big game in video game Fables?
Yeah, and like you said earlier, it's a big tonal shift, you know, almost as dramatic as the Resonance of Fate thing you were talking about. It's a pretty
Yeah.
big, like, yeah, I mean, Lucid Awakening 2 and Lucid Awakening were very, like, traditional JRPGs. You know, they have a lot of the tropes. They're very, I mean, they have a lot of humor in them, but they're very serious. You know, they have a
Mhm.
very serious storyline. There's a lot of death and sorrow and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I don't know exactly what made me want to change shift like that. I think it's just that I had already done that and I want to do something else. And I think also I've always been like my parents would always tell me like ever since I was a kid like I always liked to make people laugh. Like that's
Mhm.
something I still like to do this day. You know, I'm a whole clown basically. So like I think that was something I really wanted to focus on. I wanted to say, hey, let me make a funny game. Let me make like a really lighthearted, funny game that's gonna make people laugh and just have fun and just bring people joy to play. And that was kind of my goal from the start. And you know, I still kind of wanted to stay in the RPG field because that's what I was very comfortable with, and I do want to branch out into other stuff as well. But like, I was like, let me make something that RPG fans can enjoy and get a lot of laughs out of. And I think anyone can enjoy the humor in the game, no matter what their history is playing games. But like, especially if you're an RPG fan, like there's a lot of like satire and parody and like digs and stuff at RPG tropes and you know, even specific RPGs and stuff. Um, so yeah, I just want to do something fun, just something funny, just make people laugh, honestly, because I had already done the serious JRPG thing. So
Mhm.
basically, I always like to try something new. So like every project I do, I like to do something new and learn a lot from that process.
Now, when you talk about that aspect, I guess getting to the point of releasing Fables outside of your Lucid Awakening games, were there other projects or things that you worked on that you, I guess, used as either assets towards video game Fables, or did you, I guess, take it and go, okay, that's something I can now look to utilize or implement into this game moving forward?
No, everything was pretty much made just for video game fables. Like, I mean, I used obviously like knowledge from making an RPG with RPG Maker.
Hmm.
I think the big challenge though was RPG Maker has a lot of the stuff you need for an RPG built into it because that's the whole purpose. It's in the name. Whereas Unity, I had to basically design everything from scratch. So I had to code like the battle system, all the menu systems, the stats, like battle formulas, like there's you know tens and tens of thousands of lines of code just for that kind of stuff that comes built in to RPG Maker. So I think the main thing I used was like the knowledge of how a battle system works. And I didn't do you can do scripting in RPG Maker, you can like modify the back end stuff. I didn't do that, but I did like I looked into it a lot and I tried to like learn from it.
Hmm.
So I did learn some things from doing that, but it's mostly just the knowledge of like how a battle system works pretty much.
Now, you definitely just touched on one aspect that I wanted to ask you, and of course, reveal to our viewers and listeners if they haven't picked up on this already yet. But your studio, Momiji Studios, you're the guy, the only thing there. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you're the sole person. So, I guess I want to ask you kind of like a two-part sort of question off of this. But I'm curious, as a solo developer, solo running studio, what do you feel were like advantages that like lend to things that happened for making video game Fables? But of course, what challenges did you feel popped up throughout developing this type of game that, especially as you said, it's your first full game, so it wasn't like you had another game in Unity that you were like, oh yeah, I could just take assets from this and build on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I'm kind of I'm very like I don't know what the word for it is. I'm very like I get a lot of anxiety about thinking about like someone else helping me with a game like this because it's like I'm very meticulous and very I don't know. It's like for me the idea of like telling someone else here, can you do make X happen in the battle system? For me, it's like me just thinking about I need X to happen in the battle system. I've already started like coding it in my head. I'm just so like my brain is just so heavily geared toward that I've already started developing the system in my head. So I feel like for me it's just easier. Why don't I just go ahead and do it, you know?
Hmm.
And I know that's not good because like it a lot of people tell me like I need to try to get help on the next games because they've seen like people in my personal life, they've seen what it did to me and how it like really gave me a lot of anxiety and mental health issues. And they're right, so I do need to work on that. But I think that was it's something I had to do because or something I had to work on. Um, but for me, it's just like it's easier for me to just just do it myself instead of spending the time to explain to someone how I want it done and then how I would develop the system. And that's a big flaw, I think, with me as a developer that I need to work on. But in the time, that was a positive for me being a solo developer. It's just I could just do things how I wanted. I knew how every system in this game worked together. And you know, with an RPG, it's one of the most complex types of games there is, with so many interlinking systems. It's not just like swing a sword and do X damage and that's it. It's like there's stats, there's levels, there's equipment, there's battle systems, there's turns, there's skills, there's monsters. You know, it's just there's a lot that goes into it, and I just understood all of these things because I made all of these things. So it's like easier for me to integrate them and stuff. So that was like the only like positive I would say, and just having creative control and like not having to worry about like compromising any of my artistic vision or what I wanted to do with the game. I think that that's definitely a positive as well for me. But I mean, negative is just pretty obvious stuff. Like it's just a lot of work, a lot of mental health issues as a result of that. Just the sheer amount of like work and stress I've had over development was just insane and very intense, you know, and it's affected me a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So I think the negatives are just pretty obvious. What you would expect. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, for myself, you know, again, I dove into the game. I've played it for about 2 hours at the time of our recording, and I got to admit, Matt, I really enjoy what I've played so far. There's a lot of good things out of it, and you made a mention earlier. You feel that no matter what your background is, basically you can get laughs and humors out of the you know, the comedic nature that you hear in there, and I would completely agree. Like even to the tiniest details, to not to spoil anything, but just like the amount of like menacing looks that the characters give each other just like cracks me up. Yeah. Just and it's of course because like me and my friends, we do a lot of those same things. So let's just kind of talk a little bit about some of the characters, because obviously in the game you play as 3 characters, Aru, Nate, and Tator, and I'll let you kind of like describe them a little bit. But I guess like, how fun was it creating these 3 characters as essentially your party system, you know, using as a reference from the other games that you talked about, how important that is to you?
Yeah, Lucid Awakening 2 also had a 3-character cast, and you would sometimes get guest characters with you, but it was a 3-character cast with a job change system. And you know, there's a reason you see 3s throughout media, like, you know, like every JRPG, every anime, you have like your sets of 3 characters. You know, Naruto is basically built on sets of 3 characters, stuff like that. But it's a lot of fun. I love having this cast of like 3 characters where they have such different personalities, and they have very clashing personalities as well. It's not just like, oh, they're different. It's like they're very drastically different and on opposing sides of personality spectrums. It's a lot of fun. I love that. I love that kind of stuff. Aru, she's obviously the princess. She's the princess who doesn't want to be a princess. And she's actually kind of like the catalyst that starts the whole story. Because like the game is set in an abandoned RPG world that hasn't had a player in decades. So it's set in this RPG game world where things are very standard RPG. And one kind of side note is like, I do take issue with a lot of like satire or parody games, especially like RPGs, where they just kind of like make you play through a cliche RPG, and that's kind of like the punchline. And for me, that I take a lot of issue with that, and I don't like to dig on like other games. Like I wouldn't name any specifically, but I've seen a few like that where it's like, okay, that's not really a joke to say, wow, this really sucked in old RPGs, and then just make you do that thing. Like to me, that's not really a joke. So like, but yeah, so like it's set in this archaic RPG world, but Aru releases herself from prison by turning sideways and walking through the bars. And that is like sets off an unbelievable chain of events where everything gets completely ruined. So this RPG script is just completely thrown off the rails. Everything's ruined. And so you're not playing through that RPG script. You're playing through the story of these characters trying to get things back to normal or change things forever, you know, depending on what ends up happening in the end. And it's kind of like the setting is this old RPG world. So you get to see like an aging RPG world where the characters are getting older, they're getting frailer, like the bosses aren't what they used to be, like they're out of shape, they're not the big scary bosses they used to be. You know, you're seeing a world where, and a lot of times one thing that's cool about it is you'll see areas like dungeons that you actually never go to in this game. Like there's a dungeon out in the swamp that you never actually go to, but you know that that's a dungeon in the like script of this world. And you do meet the boss of this dungeon, but you actually just like go to her house instead and get help from her. So it's like stuff like that where it's like you're not playing through a cliche RPG, but a lot of the humor comes from the fact that this world is a cliche RPG world.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to explain. But yeah, so Aru, she's this princess who sets all the chain of events. Nate, he's this super nerdy, like he's basically a weeb. Like that's the best way to think of him. Like he is obsessed with like the stories of this world and like the heroes. Like he wants to be a hero so bad, but he's an NPC. And he's a lot of fun. He's kind of like the power of friendship, believe it main character.
Yes.
And then you've got Tator. He's kind of just like a grumpy kid. He's the prince of the, or he's the son of the villain of the RPG. And he likes to do everything by the book. Like he wants to get things back on track. His goal is we need to get things back to normal so we can do this RPG script, which is very diametrically different from Aru, you know?
Yeah.
And then you have these three characters who have these really big personalities, and they're, like I said, they're very clashing personalities, and it just creates a lot of fun. Like there's just a lot of fun dialogue that you can make with these types of personalities.
Yeah, and obviously I don't want to spoil like too much of the game because obviously we want people to go check out your game and of course, you know, support you with it. But as you said, obviously the clashing of personalities is part of the humor. And as you made mention, I mean, I busted up laughing, and my wife was like, "What's going on?" when Aru walked sideways out of the jail cells, because again, we're talking about pixel characters, and the jail cell, of course, is like your normal jail cell, so they could just fit out of the jail. And so I thought it was great. But which character did you start with, or like was one of these characters as you started to build it, you were like thinking as, all right, this is the main character that I'm looking at, and then throughout the development you started being like, well, actually maybe I'll shift at things a little bit. But like, who did you kind of start with to build this cast out?
Yeah, I think Aru was the first one. Like when I started kind of just like thinking about this game and coming up with ideas in my head, it started very different. I originally had just like a very vague idea of like an open world 8-bit RPG where you could like customize your characters. And I didn't have much more than that. And I had the idea of like having a princess as a main character who kind of like screwed things up or didn't want to be a princess, basically. So I think she was kind of the first character, but she wasn't anything. It wasn't her, but the idea of a princess as a main character was an original plan. So I think I would say Aru probably.
Okay.
And then Nate came soon after. I wanted the idea of like an NPC as a party member. You know, an NPC who's, you know, also doesn't really want to just be an NPC. Mm-hmm. And Tator came after, as I when I started actually making this into like a game in my head and not just an idea. I wanted to have like a villain with you as well. So that's where Tator came in.
Yeah, I was going to ask that next part because obviously, you know, when you think of a party, you think about going to go take down the villain, but you decided to basically incorporate a part of the villain into this party. Where, like, did that come from, I guess, inspirations from any games or shows that you saw, or was this just simply as you said, since you were building this almost like, again, and for lack of a better term, a comedic RPG, that you just thought, how funny would it be to have the villain's son as part of this group?
Yeah, I think Mario RPG probably played a big part in that. Not really consciously, but now that I really think about it, I think that was definitely a big subconscious inspiration, because in that game, you know, you have, you know, besides Geno and Mallow, you have Mario, Peach, and Bowser on your team, which is a very similar dynamic, you know, to these three characters. But yeah, it was just, I think I don't know which came first, really, if it was having Tator in the party or if the idea of your villain being someone called the Forsaken Princess, and then you're trying to rescue the king and the villain who got kidnapped by her. I'm not sure which came first, honestly, but Tator is kind of like a natural result of that because he needs to get his dad back, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason he would work with Aru and Nate for this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not really sure which one of this came first now that I think about it.
Now, I definitely love Nate because one, as you said, obviously the whole NPC wanting to be a hero. Obviously, that's been used in other like anime shows and other video games as well. But I just love how he expresses himself, especially in that opening scene where he just kind of like randomly digs in the back of his wagon and has a helmet, and he's just like, yes, I'm ready to be this hero. So is a great aspect of it. But moving to the battle component of the game, you talked a little bit about why RPGs can be very complex. I know for some people who maybe aren't totally into RPGs, especially turn-based RPGs, they may think it's a very easy system because of the stop and wait components of the battle system. But as RPG players, yourself, of course, as a developer, and like, myself, we know how complex it can be. So how did you kind of decide about going about that battle system? Because there are some interesting components that I want to bring up here in a second, but just like, where did your mind go as you were building out the battle system for what people would be, of course, into most of the game?
Yeah, I think the very core ideas behind the battle system and all the mechanics that we'll talk about as well was I wanted to make an RPG that was very challenging but also accessible. I've seen pretty good success with this. Like some of my nephews and nieces who are really young, they're playing it and they're doing pretty well without much RPG experience. But then I have other people who are, RPG vets, and they're having a lot of fun kind of like min-maxing the battle system. So I wanted to have like a low entry point, but also a very high ceiling where you can really min-max this game. And there's a lot of systems in place where you really can like min-max your play style and stuff. But yeah, I just want something accessible, but also very challenging, essentially.
And part of that component that I was talking about that's interesting is in almost every game, RPGs, whatever it is, when you get a crit, it's just automatic double your damage or 1.5 times your damage or something. But you took a component where you basically almost, as I describe it, as pocketing your crit. And you can use that pocketed crit either for using more damage on your next attack or being able to cast a spell. What brought about that thought process to go, I would say, not the common route for a crit system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not really sure actually where it came from. A lot of these ideas just kind of come to me, or they're just like a vague idea and I kind of build on it and really think about it. So I don't really have like a solid answer for you, honestly. But really it just started with a very small idea, and it's just something I thought was really cool. Just the idea of doing something different with crits. And I like to explain it to people. It's kind of like a very small limit break that you get very, very frequently. Because it's about to get in the nitty gritty of it, the basics, it's about a 40% chance of getting a crit from a basic attack. And you can modify that with like accessories and different weapons. And then, like you said, you store that crit in its little red box next to your name. And you can then use that crit to buff skills and stuff. You're not really meant to use it on a basic attack because the multiplier is lower. So basically it's like, and one thing about it is you can't use attack skills, like direct attack skills, like a fire spell or a frying pan or something like that. In Nate's case,
yes,
you can't use an attack spell unless you have a crit. So you have to have a crit to use an attack skill. You can use any other skill, like you can use like a heal anytime, but these skills get buff if you do decide to use the crit for them. So you can use your crits for like if you choose to play someone like a support character. So you can use a crit like on a heal to make it stronger. You can also get skill mods later on where you get different versions of skills. So like you can get a different version of a heal where when you crit, it heals the whole party instead and turns into AoE. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do with this crit system. And it, like I said, it's very frequent. You get it, almost every other attack. Yeah. So it's something that it gives you that kind of little bit of like that dopamine hit of like getting something cool. And it also keeps you really engaged, because one problem I have with a lot of RPGs, even the ones I love, like older Final Fantasy games, they're really not engaging. When you go back and play them again, like I went and played Final Fantasy VI again recently, which is my second favorite Final Fantasy next to Final Fantasy IX. And I still love that game, but I was like, man, this is not very engaging. You can use Edgar's auto crossbow and literally one shot any encounter for like half the game. And then
Hmm.
even when you get to like a hard boss, you're pretty much just spamming their weakness over and over and over again and maybe healing every once in a while. And I wanted to really change that because, like I said, I love these older RPGs, but like I feel like we really need a lot of innovation with stuff like Persona's done with RPGs. You know,
Yeah,
a lot of them aren't as engaging as we think they are.
and I gotta quickly just make mention, you and Pete would be great friends because he loves Final Fantasy IX. I'm a Final Fantasy VIII elitist over here, so we always have discussions about that. So of course, shout out on that real quick to there. But you made mention of about the 40% crit chance, and obviously I love the way that you introduced the battle system into the game. One, again, of course, it takes a comedic route, but it reveals that 40% chance aspect because Nate like gets a crit on his second hit and he's like, I'm so good, and Aru is like, when you have a 40% chance and you get it on your second try, I don't think that quite means you're just that good. He's like, I'm just good. I just love that aspect. So obviously, yes, it plays into the game. But as you play, and again, I'm only 2 hours in, so most of my questions, of course, center around those early components of the game. But talk to me a little bit about the teleport system and how you decided to implement that, because let's just use, for instance, a lot of other RPGs. You typically don't have the ability to backtrack to certain towns or areas very quickly until later portions of the game, using Final Fantasy, for instance, until you acquire an airship, and usually the airship comes at a later half. So like for you with this open world concept, where did you feel, I guess, the traversal aspect of your world really leaned into building a teleport system out?
Yeah, so to kind of give a little bit of background, the world map was inspired by Dragon Warrior, which is Dragon Quest One. Because that was one of my first games. That and Final Fantasy, one of my first RPGs I played, and I liked how on Dragon Warrior, you basically you start in the center of the world map, and as you went to your next location, everything would just kind of like spiral out from that central point. Like you might go up this way, and then next time you might have to go like down this way, or you might have to go like up this way. And that was like the biggest inspiration. You'll see that now if you like think about it and play it. You're starting the center of the world map, and you kind of spiral out to different locations. So I wanted to make it very accessible, and like this is one of those things, for example, where I didn't want to just do things how they've always been done just because that's the way they've been done. And I was like, why not put quick travel in here? And I think the important thing though is that you do have to get to a location before you can quick travel there. It's not just go wherever you want and just teleport and skip the travel section of that, right? So yeah, I just want to make it accessible and make it so you can always zip around wherever you need to go. And like the game it's a linear progression, but you can, if you want, you could go to a different part of the world map you're not supposed to be at yet. You'll probably get killed by some weird, wacky enemies, like the balloon golems. I saw a few streamers trying to fight these balloon golems down in the southwest side. But yeah, I just wanted to have it accessible and make it easy. And I think a big core of the teleport system was being able to go back to town anytime you want. So like, for example, because you go to town to heal up, buy items, craft new skills, all that kind of stuff. So I figured it was important to be able to let people do that and get back there easily. So like, for example, in a dungeon, you can't just teleport back from anywhere. You have to get to a teleport point. So it's like a checkpoint basically. But I wanted people to be able to go back in the middle of a dungeon and say, because the dungeon, the game is hard, it's challenging. So like you might be in dungeon and be like, my party strategy is not working out right now. I probably need to make a new skill. So once you get to a checkpoint, you can just teleport back to town, craft that skill, go right back into where you were in the dungeon. So there's some pretty generous checkpoints in there. I also want to make sure people could teleport back to the town from anywhere on the world map, which is pretty convenient. And then you can also teleport back to the point you came from.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to make it accessible. There's no reason to make people walk all the way back to town, really, especially since there's just going to be weak enemies there you don't need to fight. So, why not put a quick travel?
Totally get it. And I want to make mention again, I just talked about, obviously, at the beginning about playing Resonance of Fate, but that is one of my issues that I do have with Resonance of Fate is sometimes when you go into a dungeon, you complete the dungeon, it doesn't have a like teleport out of the dungeon to kind of go. Like you actually have to walk back through. And just for instance, the battle, it like starts it like as if it's a battle. So of course you can imagine your walking speed is not as high. So sometimes getting through the map to get back out, it's like, oh, this is a chore. So of course, going from playing Resonance of Fate to playing Video Game Fables, that was one of the things I was like, oh man, this feels nice because I could have that travel component. But as I said, I wanted to kind of work backwards a little bit, and because of timing, I kind of want to move things a little bit forward. So you started off RPG Maker 2000, made Lucid Awakening. Then you made Lucid Awakenings 2. I didn't see which one you made that in, but I'm going to guess it was probably MV. Is that correct?
It was VX.
VX. Okay. Yeah. So what, I guess, from playing those two games, again, Video Game Fables is drastically different in tone, but I guess like what helped you most, I guess, from doing those two things that you carried over to Video Game Fables, outside of just the aspect of knowing what an RPG is like? Is there anything that you felt that knowledge helped spawn and played well into developing this game?
Yeah, so like I already talked about, learning about like balancing a battle system and making enemies and stuff like that. But I think another big one is just writing in general, because I have I don't have any formal training in writing or anything like that. I don't have any formal training in narrative design. So I think being able to make an RPG, like if you make an RPG from start to finish, you're going to learn something about narrative design, because, that's the whole thing about an RPG. You're playing through this big story with a lot of characters. So I think I learned a lot about like writing, about character dialogue. There's so much to learn about stuff like that, and you can always improve. And like I'll always try to keep improving it. But I think I have improved a lot from Lucid Awakening 1 to Video Game Fables, for example. So I think that's the biggest thing, besides just like the more back end stuff of like battle systems and all that.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about earlier in the episode of the post-release anxiety that you had, type of thing. So I'm kind of just curious, for you to describe to our listeners, I guess, is just in general, though, seeing the game get released, and not to try to give you more anxiety or anything, but looking at how the game has been received so well. I mean, I haven't seen a single negative review at the moment on this, but just in general for you, how does it feel getting this game out, getting it out for people to play, and just seeing the reception so far around this?
Yeah, I think I'm still kind of in shock that it's actually done, because I've been working on this for almost 5 years now, full time, for maybe like 2 or 3 years, and as someone who's always struggled with mental health all my life, with anxiety and depression and stuff, it's like I said, this definitely did not help my mental health. I'll tell you that. It's quite the opposite. So like every day, I would I would have anxiety and think about releasing the game. Like that was something on my mind every single day, almost 24/7, And then, so after all that build up, when it actually happens, I feel like I haven't really quite fully accepted that as the reality yet. Like my brain still hasn't quite really moved on yet, because I've just been building it up for years, And then it finally happens. It's kind of like, okay, I need to actually adjust my vision of reality, what's going on here. And I would say I have been much better. Like it is a big relief to finally be done with this project. And like you said, just like all the good reception is very encouraging and makes me feel like I was doing something right this whole time and I wasn't wasting my time. Like I would say some of the best things ever happened was getting like fan art from people. I actually I have a few on my wall right there. I don't know if I can see them.
Yeah, I could. I didn't know if you created them or not, but I love that fan art.
Yeah. One of them was from a friend. He did a wooden cutout. The little perler bead things are from my nephew. And then a streamer made that painting for me. And then I've had a couple other fan arts not printed. Like I have a list somewhere. I made sure I save everyone. Like I had a few people on Twitter that made one. I had a few art streamers that were like drawing my characters on stream. And it's like stuff like that it's unexplainable how that makes you feel, because it's like this is something that came out of my brain. I've worked so hard on, and it's just like to see it manifest not only in a finished game, but to see these like characters and world manifest in like other people's artistic visions. Like it's unexplainable really how that can make a person feel, you know? And you know, even with all this, you know, all that aside, I think the harder part though is dealing with like the more like adult side of it, where it's like having to deal with, okay, are my sales good, you know, am I making money from this? I think that's the part where it's harder to really cope with that in a healthy way. It's very difficult to deal with that because, you know, a game like this, like just a small indie game like this, it's not going to get a lot of publicity, it's not going to get a lot of sales. And like I am very happy with the amount of sales I've got, uh and I think it's one of those things where if I were to like say like how many sales I've got, like if you talk to any like big developer, they'd be like, "Wow, what a failure." You know what I mean? But like when you're just a small developer doing all your marketing by yourself, making this game by yourself, and you have X number of sales, it's like, "Wow, this is really cool. Like this many people want to play my game." Um and like I'm kind of a pessimist. So, like I wasn't like setting myself to be like, "Wow, this is going to be life changing. I'm going to make $1 million and be able to like settle down and buy a house or whatever."
Mhm.
But you know, it is a little disappointing when you don't. You kind of have this little thing in the back of your mind, like, "Ooh, this is going to be the next Undertale. This is going to be Stardew Valley." You know, like you kind of sometimes let these very overambitious ideas creep in the back of your head. So like I said, I am kind of a pessimist, so I didn't really like get disappointed by not like being able to buy a mansion tomorrow. uh, but you know, it would be nice if I had more sales. It'd be nice if I could actually relax a little and like use this as a nice source of income. Because before this, when I was developing, I was just working part time with my brother. He has like an IT business, and that was like my income because I've made, you know, before that I made $0 off video game Fables. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm just doing it from my own free time. So like it would be really cool if I could get to a point where I get enough publicity and reviews and get some of these bigger like websites and stuff to cover it, where, you know, I could maybe like pay my, you know, I could pay my rent with it and stuff, and then maybe just work on another project or something like that, you know?
Yeah, and I want to just say, you know, one, as a person who, no stranger around here, working on growing what was originally a side fun project while I worked in TV
Hmm.
news into something else. I know exactly what you mean about the anxiety of looking at what am I bringing in? Is it, you know, doing enough to provide for things? Now,
Yeah.
thankfully, of course, my wife makes enough money for us that I don't have to worry about that at the moment. But I get what you're saying that. But again, I don't want to sugarcoat this aspect. The game is really well done, and I don't just say that because you're here to talk about it. I say that because I genuinely enjoyed what I've played so far, and think that this game could be to that level that you're talking about if just enough people, you know, find out about it. Obviously, I wanted to bring you on to talk about this. But I guess my thing, I want to like kind of go down this list real quick that you had in your press kit, because of course I think it is fairly phenomenal to have here. But then I kind of am gonna have you kind of do like a signing off type of comments. But you know, you have in here, of course, you know, the game was has inspiration and vibes from things like Paper Mario, Earthbound, Undertale, obviously things that you talked about, Dragon Quest, you know, and Final Fantasy. But it has its own little things. But you even have in here, of course, you know, it was in the Shack News Indie Showcase. It was featured in the Paperverse Direct, which is a collection of indie games that are at least somewhat inspired by Paper Mario. And then you listed off, of course, a number of viewers and streamers and YouTubers that have talked about the game. I mean, this one here put Sleeper Hit Indie RPG of the Year. Clever, funny, pretty. It plays really well, too. You know, getting a little bit later down is talking about 10 promising turn-based RPGs to expect during the year. So you obviously, as you said, you're getting a lot of good reception around it. It's just now the marketing aspect, part of what my old business was, and I totally get that troublesome. So that's where I'm going to kind of leave the floor open for you for a little bit, a few minutes. You take how long you want. But I guess for the listener, if they haven't been convinced just yet throughout our discussion talking about checking out this game, as you, the person who, of course, poured love into this game, and you can tell it there, what would you say to just have somebody at least go give it a look?
Yeah, I think it's something very unique. Like, I don't think they're, and I could be wrong, but I think the fact that it's a lighthearted game that's like set in a world that's an abandoned game world that hasn't had a player in decades. Like, I think that's a very unique setting, and it's interesting to explore. Like, what would happen to the characters of a game world? Like, do they have lives when they're not putting on this script for the player? Like, do they age? Does the world age? Like, it's a very interesting, unique concept, I think. And there's probably some other games that have touched on similar ideas, but I'm not really aware of any. So it's something very unique to explore. It's super funny. Don't just take my word for it. It's not like, hey, my mom says it's funny, so it's obviously funny. It's like, a lot of people go read reviews for it, like see what people are saying. Like, it's a very funny game. It's gonna make you laugh. It's a lot of fun. It's challenging. It's got a lot of unique stuff to it. It's got twists on like turn-based combat and RPGs. And I would say the biggest thing, like, there's a free demo, and it lets you play all the way up from the beginning of the game through the first dungeon, and it's like, well over an hour of gameplay, and you can even carry your save data from the demo over to the full game. So, like, why not give it a shot? You know what I mean? Read some reviews for it, see what people are saying, see if it's something that would click with you. Just give it a shot. It's not going to cost you anything. It's just going to cost you a little bit of time, and I think you'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah, he said don't take his word for it that it's funny. Take my word for it. If you're listening to this podcast, it is funny. I'm enjoying it so much. Matt, thank you so much for joining here. Obviously, I'm going to put a link to the Steam page down in the description or the show notes, depending on which platform you're using to listen to this. So then that way you can go check it out. And as he said, there is a free demo there to go check out. So at the very least, you're spending a little bit of time to at least give a look to this game. But Matt, thank you so much again for joining us. I really appreciate this. Normally, this is where I would put updated video games that are releasing this week, but I actually, because of the fact of trying to buy my house, I forgot to put this week's upcoming video game list together. So what I'm going to do real quick is just kind of read off of Game Informer's website, and then we'll see, of course, Matt, if any of these games catch your attention. So, of course, again, this is airing next week. So we're talking about August 12th through the 19th. So basically on August 12th, you have Marvel's Spider-Man on PC. On August 16th, you have Blossom's Tales 2, The Minotaur Prince for Switch and PC. Roller Drome for PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC. Curse to Golf on August 18th for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. RPG Time, The Legend of Right for Switch. Thymesia for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC. We Are OFK for PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Switch, and PC. And then on August 19th, Friday, you have Madden NFL 23 for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Matt, I know you're busy right now and you're working on Xenoblade Chronicles, so you're probably not going to have anything. But are any of these games catching your attention or had caught your attention in the past?
I'm like so far removed from new game releases at the point. Like I said, I'm still in like a daze, and like I got one. I chose for some reason to pick this big RPG that's going to take 100 hours so to blue. So I don't know. I do know Blossom Tale looks really cool. I saw the first one, looked really cool. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'm not really familiar with some of those other games, but yeah, I'm going to be playing Xenoblade for a while.
That's completely fine. For myself, the only one that I'm really looking at in this list, but I likely won't pick it up right away because, like you, I'm not busy in your context, but I'm busy in other ways, and I also have way too many games, as my wife always tells me, is Roller Drome and Thymesia. And then, of course, the little old me who was competitive in Madden wants to get Madden again. But I don't know. We'll see if I pick up Madden. Yeah, little known fact for those that haven't been around the podcast for a long time. I used to compete in Madden tournaments, and I actually won a couple of them. So that's how. It's my little old facts back in the day. But everybody, thank you so much for tuning in here to the One More Game podcast. I've been one of your co-hosts, Jeremy Culver, a.k.a. Darcy. This has been Matt Sharp, the man behind Video Game Fables. Go check it out. And as always, everybody, stay hydrated, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep on gaming. We'll see you guys on the next episode.